1976 in Germany, in the small town of Klingenberg, a student of pedagogy, Anneliese Michel, died during an exorcism. She was a perfectly normal, healthy, and very religious person. Her problems began in 1968. It was then that she began to experience strange attacks, brief fainting, body stiffness, and a feeling of suffocation and crushing. Over time, her condition worsened. She became more and more depressed, and she saw devilish faces more and more. Doctors suspected epilepsy and prescribed treatments to prevent seizures. Meanwhile, the attacks continued to escalate. Eventually, her parents began to suspect her possession. So they took the girl on a pilgrimage to San Damiano, a place famous for Mary's apparitions. During the pilgrimage, the girl acted very strangely. She began to feel a great disgust for holy objects. She was unable to enter the church or look at the holy pictures. She was tearing medallions and rosaries. She also spoke foul words. Soon, a terrible smell began to emerge around her, which could not be ventilated in any way. For many years, Anneliese was subjected to very detailed medical examinations by various doctors, who, however, were unable to reach a common conclusion regarding her ailments. Mental problems were suspected, as well as brain damage and epilepsy. For this reason, she was also taking powerful medications to prevent seizures. Since the treatment was unsuccessful, some doctors said there was no cure for the devil. The girl's parents finally decided to ask the church for help. At first, the priests only watched the girl. They also gave her the usual blessing that brought her an unheard of, but only temporary relief and relaxation. The girl's condition, however, continued to deteriorate. In the end, it was decided to conduct a trial exorcism. It is performed mentally, and the exorcised person is not informed about it. Its purpose is to find out whether it is really a case of possession. During the trial exorcism, the girl reacted very violently. She started to go mad, scream, and tear the rosary. In September 1975, the bishop gave permission to start the actual exorcisms. They lasted about a year. Their course was recorded on audio tapes. This was what Anneliese wanted. During the exorcism, the demons revealed themselves. There were 6 of them. They called themselves Lucifer, Judas, Cain, Nero, Hitler, and the fallen priest Fleischmann. Anneliese suffered enormously. She roared, growled, squirmed, shouted profanity at the priest. Her face was twisted and deformed. The girl gnashed her teeth, and her body flexed in an unnatural way. She spoke in a thick male voice and also in unfamiliar languages. During the exorcisms, Anneliese also received consolation in the form of visions of saints, angels, the Mother of God, and Christ. Stigmata also appeared on her body. During the exorcisms, the Mother of God was asked to release her. When she appeared, the demons went berserk. The demons did not want to leave her body for a long time, but after exorcism, they were finally determined to leave. October 31st, 1975 was to be the day of the girl's release. The demons went away, but returned after a while. Why? During one of the visions, Our Lady asked Anneliese if she was ready to suffer and offer her suffering as penance for sinners. The girl agreed. So she took upon herself these enormous sufferings in exchange for the salvation of souls in danger of damnation. Anneliese kept saying that a change would come in July. At the end of her life, she looked like a human wreckage. She was emaciated. She ate hardly anything because the demons would not let her eat. She was badly mauled. Her face was bluish and swollen. She scratched the walls with her fingernails, broke glass with her head, and bit stones from the wall. The devil was throwing her from wall to wall. She hurt herself to the point of blood, hitting her face, rubbing her face against the wall, hitting her head with great force against the door frame or the floor, making thousands of kneelings at a frantic pace. Anneliese claimed that, according to Our Lady's promise, in July she would be finally freed from the demons. On July 1st, 1976, she died. Anneliese's parents and priests were accused of causing the girl's death. The media found them guilty before the trial began in earnest. The campaign against the accused began in the country. The judge turned out to be biased. During the hearing, the most significant evidence was rejected. Partial witnesses were called. The only efforts were to punish the accused. The parents and priests of the exorcists were found guilty of the death of Annalise and were convicted and sentenced to a 2-year suspended sentence. Later, an American cultural anthropologist, Professor Felicitas Goodman, took up the matter. For over 15 years, she has been researching the so-called religious state of emergency. She developed a method of distinguishing true possession from disease states based on the articulation of sounds. She examined the case of Annalise Michel in great detail on the basis of audio tapes and came to surprising conclusions. She stated that Annalise Michel was truly possessed. The girl's death was not caused, however, by the exorcists or omissions on the part of her parents, but by poisoning with anti-epilepsy drugs. I had a family friend growing up I will call Jane. She was very good friends with my older sister, plus our families were intermarried. Her much older sibling married one of my uncles. Though her parents were devout Catholics, most of their kids didn't really buy into it as wholeheartedly, including Jane. She married very young due to pregnancy, and her marriage was very difficult. Her husband came from a very odd family. They seemed dysfunctional, though his parents were still married to each other. His dad worked all the time, and his mother was super antisocial. She would not come to anything, not any of her kids' ball games, none of their music performances, nothing. She had 0 friends and just seemed terrified all the time. They had no religion, and I don't think they were even baptized. Jane's husband had dabbled in the occult when he was a teenager, which was very recent. I think he lit candles to summon various spirits or something like that. He did all this in his bedroom at his parents' house. Well, immediately after getting married, Jane and her husband rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, figuring that would be enough for them and the baby that was soon to arrive. He wanted out of his parents' house, and Jane didn't like his parents either, so they were happy to start their new life together. Well, Jane would reach out to me and my sister to complain about her new mother-in-law from time to time. I figured this was normal, and this a trope for a reason. She told us she figured out why her mother-in-law had no friends and never went anywhere. She is so weirdly obsessed and devoted to her husband. Because he works the overnight shift, she drinks coffee and makes herself stay up all night so that she doesn't have to sleep without him. Isn't that crazy? And sometimes she hates being away from his so badly that she will drive her car to the parking lot of his work and sleep outside of it. Isn't that nuts? What is wrong with this lady? I could understand if he only had to work overnight for a week here and there, but this has been going on for decades. This is why husband is so weird and had such a screwed up childhood. Yes, this is crazy, we would agree. Well, not too long after the baby is born, his mom moves in with them, supposedly to help with the baby. She is sleeping on the couch. Jane tolerated it for a while, but after a couple months, she puts her foot down with her husband. This is crazy. Your mother cannot live with us. This isn't okay. We don't have the space. Why can she suddenly leave your dad now? What changed? She can't sleep without him, but now she doesn't even live with him. Your mother is crazy, and I am not putting up with it. Husband pleaded for his mom to stay. You don't understand how important this is to her. I have never seen her so happy. It is like I finally have a mom. Jane was like, 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to kick your mom out, or the baby and I leave. Husband has the tough talk with his mom that she has to go. She loses her composure and cries like a little baby, telling him that he is going to kill her, that she can't go back home. I forgot to mention another weird thing that happened. When Jane's husband moved out of his parents' house, his mother took a bunch of scrap wood and just nailed a bunch of it over his door that was at the end of the hallway and also over his window on the outside of the house. When Jane told us this, we were like, wow, talk about abandonment issues. She can't even face that her son is no longer in his room and just chooses to pretend like it doesn't exist. So weird. Your mother-in-law is truly crazy. The next day, mother-in-law approaches Jane over coffee in the morning. She just pours her heart out to her. She says she needs her help, that she's being attacked in the middle of the night by something that wants to hurt her, and she is so sorry for being such a burden, but that she just can't go back. When Jane calls to tell us this, we are like, so manipulative. Maybe she really is crazy. At the time, I just didn't know much about demonic activity. But Jane wasn't sure what to do. So she called her dad, and her dad was like, you need to talk to Father. So Jane and her mother-in-law went to talk with our local priest. The priest scheduled an exorcism for the house right away. I know usually things take time, but for whatever reason, he took it very seriously. The day he did it, he had several people from our parish, people that I know and trust and are not dramatic or weird or crazy, come to help or witness, I guess. Anyway, Jane and her husband were there as well. Jane said everything was totally normal and nothing was weird until they started going down the hall where his bedroom had been at the end. The priest was first, and everyone else was sort of lined up down the hall behind him. When he got to the door and started praying, you could just feel like something very powerful running from the room down the hall. She said it felt just like when a person rushes past you and you can feel that they move the air and like you feel a breeze, but more powerful. And right when this happened, one of the lay women from our parish screamed out. She said she had been hit, and when they walked into the living room where there was more light, and they shined a flashlight on her skin where she said she had been hit, there was a very red handprint, as if something had hit her very hard, but it wasn't quite a human hand. It had extra long fingers. The priest finished the exorcism, and everything was fine. The mother-in-law was finally able to sleep at night without being attacked, and I guess things went back to normal. Anyway, I know this sounds strange, but I personally know everyone in this story, and so I really believe it. I was an edgy adolescent seeking some sort of control in my life. I decided that the religion I was born into, Catholicism, was statistically unlikely to be true. What are the chances, right? Only a fool believes the religion they are told. So, I began to dabble in the occult. It was all very stupid, available at Walmart consumerist junk. Certain jewelry that was supposed to give me peace, crystal gobbled gook, salts to repel bad energy, whatever. I was a stupid kid. I also got a Ouija board from big chain toy store. I figured it was silly, but I thought, why not? It might be fun. I had a variety of experiences with it, some of it very boring, like nothing happening. Some of it felt fun, like we would ask it questions like what boy had a crush on us and things like that. It always told us what we wanted to hear. Sometimes it really shocked us by the breadth of its knowledge. Like one time there was a girl from another town in school, and when she asked what boy liked her, it gave her the name of an actual boy in her school, which the rest of us could not possibly have known. Maybe it was all her and she was lying? Maybe. What was weird was a lot of times it just wouldn't work at all. This made it even more exciting when it did work. It sounds weird, but I was like addicted to it. I felt like it finally gave me some power over my life. I was very ugly, very unpopular, and psychologically bullied by a lot of kids at my school. I felt that it made me better or smarter than them. One day, I decided to try to contact my great-grandmother, who was a very devout Catholic. It was very different. I am not claiming that I actually contacted her. I have no clue. But instead of talking to us and answering all our stupid boy questions, it would only respond one word over and over again: lamb. It was weird. We tried asking all kinds of questions, but that was always the response. Finally, we said, "Do you know what day it is?" And it said, April, some date, the year she died. I was a kid when she died, so I didn't know the date that it was, just the year and month. I looked at my sister, who is the family genealogist, like that person in the family who remembers everything, and I said, wow, that must be the day she died. And I got really excited. I felt like I was really talking to my awesome great-grandmother. I loved her. She lived right next to us. I still remember the way she smelled. She used to call our house every Sunday to make sure that my mom took us to Mass. We pretty much quit going after she died. But my sister quickly said, no, that isn't the day she died. She died on April X, 199X. I thought, well, that's weird. Why would she, a spirit, whatever, get it so close and yet wrong? Doesn't a person remember the day they died? Then my sister gasped and got this far away look, and I was like, "What? You don't think it's her? Do you think it's a bad spirit?" And she was like, "I am pretty sure that is the day she went into the coma." And we all just got really freaked out and quit playing with it that night. At some point, a few months later, I was using it again when suddenly it started acting super weird, like just moving really fast all over the place, not really trying to spell anything. Usually, we thought we were always talking to these same couple of spirits, and they told us their names. I don't want to type them here, but they aren't impressive or anything. Anyway, this time we kept asking, "Is this X? Is this Y?" It kept saying no. There was just so much energy that it is hard to explain. It almost felt like our hands were being dragged along. I don't want to go into stupid detail, but it just felt very evil, like it was trying to scare us. It was like toying with us. I can't really explain it. It was not answering our stupid boy crush questions, but just really freaking us out. Finally, we threatened that if it didn't tell who it was, that we would just quit. It spelled out the word Satan. It is hard to explain, but like in that moment, I knew that evil existed, that it was very real. I didn't even believe in God, but that made me believe in evil. I was scared, and I knew I wanted nothing to do with it. I am not sure if I prayed or what. I just put the thing up in my closet and never used it again. This is just one story. I have another completely unrelated one that I will put on another comment because this is too long. Father Jerome wiped his lips with a clean white napkin after having a makeshift snack. He was the youngest priest ever to hold Mass in St. Patrick's Old Cathedral in 50 years. He was just 31 and had come to the big city from a small Pennsylvania parish about 2 months ago. He had just started to get used to the city's mentality, the traffic, the ruckus, the food, and the more clement weather. But he never forgot who he was and where he had started from, so he never neglected to pray for the people of his little village who he had spent his early years as a priest with. But today was different. No, this was not the same. He had been part of 2 exorcisms as Father Nicholas's apprentice, but he had never been alone. Furthermore, the symptoms that those 2 hosts presented with were so mild that even if he had not yet formed a consolidated view of the manifestations of good and evil, he had started to lean towards some Freudian transference of their meaning and had convinced himself that the exorcised were just weak characters that required psychiatric assistance before they started to immerse themselves again in the calm haven of faith. He laid both his hands in the gold-embroidered altar cloth and bent forward, taking in slow breaths as his father had taught him as a child, so that he could channel all his stress, especially when he was a mess and had to be with people that very time. He had a bad premonition. Maybe he was somewhat ill, he said to himself, while the last bite of his lunch threatened to charge upward again into his esophagus. In about a quarter of an hour, he was expecting one Margaret Malone, 22, a law student, and some members of her family. Her father, Vincent Malone, had approached him last Sunday after Mass and had related those unthinkable for any human mind events that involved his one and only daughter. Events that since last month had changed the life of all his family. Those events were so hair-raising that Father Jerome raised his eyes ever so often to meet Vincent's eyes, as if he could not believe that all those hideous, horrific images were the product of speech of an everyday middle-aged man, a rail driver in the Long Island line. Unfortunately, the Polaroid pictures that Vincent showed him with tears and desperation in his eyes as their short conversation ended dispersed both his incredulity and his restful night's sleep for the week that followed. You needn't be an orthopedic specialist to see that the joints of the arms and legs of this unfortunate young woman were bent backward from normal, while she exhibited her swollen tongue and a torn and bruised face, with her head looking upwards in a body curved like a human table. He walked to the small wash basin outside and to the left of the chancel, turned the tap, and made to drink some water. He looked at his clean collar and his pale, gaunt face in the little mirror above the wash basin. He wiped the drops of sweat from his brow and coughed a couple of times to clear his voice. He stared at the statue of Christ crucified, which reached up to his waist at the right side of the altar. Made of plaster and painted with light pastel colors, it looked worn with age as the sparkling luster of its surface had started to fade with the passage of time. With a slow and determined step, he walked towards the statue, kneeled, and casting a fleeting glance into the soulless artificial eyes, he bent his head humbly and began to pray, "Lord, help thy humble servant. Give me the strength, O Lord, to dispatch evil to the flames of hell. Help me deliver this young Christian from the mephitic spirit of evil. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen." A creaking noise, augmented by the acoustics of the ample space of the church, was heard, and then what sounded like conversation. But what frightened Father Jerome was otherworldly laughter, ironic shrieks, and smiles that were extinguished abruptly as he turned to look. He got up and walked towards the family. What he had heard seconds before had indelibly registered into his subconscious, but the sudden silence that ensued made him think he might just have imagined it. Vincent was holding tightly the left arm of his daughter, while his wife held on to the right arm, both so close to her that they supported her and looked alternately at her and Father Jerome, who was walking toward them. The girl wore a questioning expression on her face and sized up Father Jerome with disbelief. She was sweating profusely with her hair glued on her face while she breathed slowly with a whistling sound. Her head was slightly inclined to the side while her eyes were wide open and wet. Father Jerome took a small-aged leather-bound book from his pocket and opened it somewhere in the middle. He turned towards the parents and said, "Come closer. Don't let her go. Bring her here at the center under the dome." Vincent tightened his grip on his daughter. "Come, dear. Be brave and all will go well." The young girl pulled away her eyes from Father Jerome and spoke to her father with a heavy male voice and an indistinct accent. "Pot, dot glurg, dot glurg, dot glurg. All will go to pot." Her malevolent laughter ceased immediately, and her look transfixed the priest again until his stomach was taut. "Did you soil your pants, yellow boy? You ain't seen nothing yet, horny guy. Wahaha glurg." She started to spit mucus on the ground. "Do you want to see everything, fag? Well, here it is." Her body curved backward by itself like a huge parenthesis mark, and, with an abrupt move, her clothes were torn from top to bottom as if a razor had ripped them apart. "You are nothing to me, you don't scare me, come and fuck me now, fuck me!" And she started to moan loudly and contract her pelvis up and down in a lewd and primitive fashion. Her mother uttered a whimper of desolation which hit the ears of the others like a club. Father Jerome drew in a deep breath, tensed his body, and started reciting slowly and steadily. "Crux sancta sit mihi lux, non draco, sit mihi dux, vade retro, satana, tranzel. May the holy cross be my light, let not the dragon be my guide, go back Satan." The possessed girl tensed every muscle in her face in a grimace full of furrows and hate, and cried out to the priest, "Are you a sissy? Don't you hear me when I'm talking to you?" Suddenly, her voice became a more booming bass, as if the element that haunted spoke at last. "Tell him to shut up. Tell him to shove it nuo not. That prayer F. Ed Benedict, you had sent me away by that. Then ahai. Putta lied on it, primate of the church. Father Jerome continued steadfastly and with greater certainty, seeing that his words began to have an effect. "Nunquam suade mihi vana, sunt mala quae libas e ipse venena bibase transle." Never lead me unto temptation with vain things. What you are offering is evil. Drink the poison yourself. After the reading of the last word, and while all present crossed themselves with eyes shut, the girl closed her eyes and collapsed. Her parents, with Father Jerome's assistance, laid her down in the pews of the first row. There the priest continued the reading for quite some time more, but the only reaction from the girl was some movement of her eyeballs under her eyes closed tight, and, from time to time, some mild, unintelligible murmurs. With none of the three of them being any the wiser, a thin black plume of smoke was beginning to emit from the girl's nostrils and began whirling and growing. They were quite close to her, but no one of them saw the ectoplasm, which, once its exit was complete, quickly soared toward the chancel. The girl's mother wiped her forehead with a handkerchief, and after making sure her daughter was breathing more regularly this time, looked at Father Jerome with her eyes full of anticipation and agony. She asked him if he was finished, and smiled a smile of deliverance for the first time in quite a while when she saw his affirmative nod. The couple covered the girl with a blanket which Father Jerome provided, and with a drink of water succeeded in making her stand on her feet again. Her look had changed. Her face, even though showing the exhaustion of the ordeal she had been through, was now serene, and her eyes were full of gratitude, even though she had not yet realized why. That Father Jerome accompanied them to the exit and advised them to get the girl to a hospital for her to rest and be examined for a supposed collapse due to overexertion. He reached the wash basin dragging his feet. He was a physical wreck, but the heaviest blow had been to his soul. It was too much for him. His reflection in the mirror gave him a start. He had to calm down, to relax and try and get some sleep. He opened a small trunk where his vestments and some personal belongings were. He fumbled a little with his hands under the garments. He took out a small metal flask of brandy. He opened it and pressed it on his lips, shaking. He needed strength and warmth. He took in one gulp and then another and another. He drank looking at his image in the mirror without thinking until the flask was empty. He took in a few deep breaths and felt the numbness of alcohol rise from his stomach to the rest of his body. He went into the chancel again. He would pray and would go home to bed. He wished for a deep, dreamless sleep he was so in need of. He kneeled a bit in a daze before the statue of the crucified Lord and started praying. He wanted to thank Jesus for giving him the power to relieve that girl from the demon that possessed her. There was no doubt that something metaphysical had taken place. Something great even for him with his quite pure soul. He cleared his throat and started mumbling. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. He began to notice a burning feeling, from the outside this time, hammering him on his head, coming from above his position. He lifted his head by reflex while he continued to pray perfunctorily. In the low light of the altar, he saw the statue of the crucifixion shining intensely, and it couldn't be. It was probably the brandy, and the fact he doused it down all at once. It couldn't, the statue, let down. Tears. He got a grip of his eyes and his heart and went on, Thank you, Lord, for the heat was rising all at once and was almost burning him. He looked at the statue again. The aged varnish together with paint was flowing now from the statue's face, canceling the details that its artist had affected. As if his eyes no longer communicated with his brain, Jerome completed his phrase in a louder voice. Thank you, Lord, for helping me exorcise this demon. The eyelids of Jesus opened suddenly, revealing horrid ebony eyes. The statue's head turned towards the priest, making the sound of chalk being rubbed on a blackboard, and a white fissure appeared in the statue's neck, revealing the underlying gypsum. The answer was direct and forceful enough to shake the altar as lightning on a clear day. You exorcist, balls. Ah. The demon in his utmost irony had haunted the statue of Christ crucified, knowing who he was facing and that he would break him once and for all. He unhinged his hands and feet from the cross, and with a backflip started to move, spider-like, climbing on all fours the wall over the altar. And, he laughed, with a sarcastic laughter that tore apart Jerome's heart. The priest found his legs with some difficulty, and stepping back, he gripped a chair inside the chancel. He grabbed on the fly a small glass vessel with holy water in it, and took the bunch of basil that was dipped inside. He started sprinkling towards the demon's direction, crying out, Not him, blasphemer, abominable creature of darkness, child of Satan, feel his fire, the one and true. The demon was on the ceiling of the chancel by now, and whimpered like a wounded feline at each drop of holy water that touched him. Just as Jerome thought he had beaten him, he began to laugh again, and to spew out in a horrid, sarcastic voice, ha. You really believed that your drops of water burned me? Do you want to see fire, Ashel? Real fire? Still hanging upside down and on all fours, he looked around, snarled, and started spitting. Sputa of fire that inflamed whatever they touched. He spat, burned, and logged. Jerome backtracked outside the chancel, but the beast followed him from the ceiling, never ceasing to spew fire to the left and right, but never up front. He did not want to kill the priest, but worse, he wanted to scare him to death. The chancel was engulfed in flames, and now the contents of the alcoves in front of it burned. Now the candelabra had caught fire too, and the bending candles bowed to the force of the fire that all the while raised the temperature inside the church. Very quickly, the flames had engulfed all the nave and transept, and the stained glass in the windows was exploding outwards. Father Jerome thought he was in hell. All the faces of saints in the iconography of the church were blackened now and suggested soldiers from the order of evil. He was stepping back continuously without thinking, having surrendered to the rage of the demon and the insufferable heat of the fire. He was now a human-like puppet, as if his movements were controlled by a joker's strings. Suddenly, noises were heard from the front main gate of the church. Someone was trying to break it from the outside. A fire department siren began breaking in through the raucous progress of the flames that were swallowing everything in their path. The demon, knowing what was to follow, gave a leap in no time and landed on the floor. He bypassed Jerome and climbed on a wall. He crucified himself anew between two forms of saints, and laughing and winking at the priest, he closed his eyelids, turned his head on the side, and became a soulless statue once more. The door of the church opened with a loud noise, and 2 police officers, followed by 3 firemen, entered the vestibule with their faces covered. They found Jerome in a miserable state and asked him what had happened. The neighbor who had called 911 had stated with certainty that all the while he was on his balcony during the last hour, the priest was alone in the church. Father Jerome was not listening to the police officer's questions. He was pointing at the figure of the statue of the crucifixion, crying all the time, "It, him, he is there." His breath was reeking, a mixture of fear and alcohol, and the officer beside him was quick to make the connection. The priest became drunk and set fire to the church. They handcuffed him and led him to the patrol car. He had a lot to answer for. Outside the church, which by now was burning almost to the ground, were parked in a haste a police cruiser and a fire brigade vehicle. The police put Jerome in the back seat of the cruiser and set off for the station. Inside the church, the firefighters had begun their work, but the struggle looked uneven. There was now little hope for even the least thing to be saved. Father Jerome uttered not a word from the moment he was handcuffed and did not resist arrest. Yet at the moment the cruiser was starting, he turned his head with unease and in tears behind him and looked for no obvious reason at the front gate of the church. And, he was certain that He saw W.E. The black ectoplasm that had come out of the girl's nostrils and which no one had seen. After the exorcism was now coming out of the church and Jerome could now see it in the light of the fire under the church gate, he saw it disappear again into the grill of the fire truck's door. He thought he also saw a spark in the fire truck's cabin and the driver jerking like a string puppet for a moment. As soon as the cruiser was turning to disappear on a route to the station, Jerome saw the fire truck dashing in the wrong lane with tires screeching. Thanks for spending your time here. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, feel free to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.